first question is now, how did the transition from analog to digital technologies in the 1980s, impact music, visual art, and of course entertainment?
I wanted to actually, when these questions were there, were set up, I actually wanted to talk about even like earlier, like 70s and 60s and all of that. But then I
Yeah.
feel like that would have been too long, to cover. Those are too many things to cover. So I just thought let's just stick to, the past 3 4 decades. It
Hmm.
really like the word technology sort of a thing really it evolves as every single decade, but at least in today's world, what when we say technology, all the sorts of things that people can relate to, a lot of that started from the 80s. So
Hmm.
especially the biggest influence in that was the music, uh,
Yeah.
because you had like one of the things that started in the 80s was something called MIDI. I for the I forgot the some music interface digital or something. I forgot the entire full form of it, but it's basically digitally, you can you can, when you have like an instrument, it can be a keyboard, it can be a drum pad or anything. You play the
Hmm.
note and it digitally somewhat, it's like a program sort of a thing. So whichever DAW software that it's going through, so whichever note that you're playing, that note, so it sort of codes, that this is note has been played for this long. So you can eventually, if you've played, let's say, like a piano note, you can turn that into a synth. You can do
Hmm.
all those sort of a thing. So in EDM and hip hop today, you can see a lot of people do use MIDI. and
Hmm.
uh, and the use of synth, that because MIDI came into the 80s, a lot of people started using synth, which is why synth music became a thing in the 80s. And to the point, there is something, synth music is something that we all know. And if you actually look at the 80s music, you can hear a lot of synth music in all of them, actually. Even
Yeah.
Stranger Things, right? Like
Hmm.
if anyone has seen the show, the main theme song itself has a lot of synth music, and a lot of the background music, they use synth music. It's like an homage to the 80s. So
Yeah.
you can see them using it in movies and music and all sorts of like entertainment. So in 80s, also like using MP3 players, like Walkman was a big deal in the
Hmm.
80s. So so from the world where people were listening to like LPs and vinyl records to having cassettes, like the fact that someone can make their own playlist, all these sorts of things were so interesting. It was complete, now it seems old, but at that time obviously it was something, some next level technology for them. But I also feel like, for us, obviously, because we were born far later, it almost seems old for us. But
Yeah.
I feel like there might be like, just like how in the 90s when internet came, a lot of musicians, sort of did not like the fact that music was out there for free. I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure, and now, but like later on, the generation who grew through the internet, for them it wasn't, they didn't look at it that way. I think the same thing might have happened even like in the 80s, right? Like for someone, who was not used to this sort of thing, they grew up listening to, let's say, something like rock music back
Hmm.
in the 60s and 70s. I'm sure for them also it would have been very difficult to, listen to something like this that is becoming a big deal and is becoming the next big thing in music. So I think just like in every single like decade, I think 80s also had that. So
Hmm.
it's these small uh, innovations that just came in, that was a big deal.